I'm going to talk this morning not so much about the technology at all. In all fairness, I am not an expert in the technology of blockchain, but I am an expert in social value measurement and management. And so what I aim to talk about is how blockchain in a way enables some of these emerging practices to start measuring and discussing what is social value. And so there's a quote that I really like. So in looking around and learning about blockchain, you see that there's a lot of different growing possibilities and potentials. And so people are imagining blockchain in multiple different ways. One of those ways being what Fatazzi had said in Oxford Analytica. And she said that what the internet did to liberate the transfer of information, blockchain may be able to do to the transfer of value. And I completely agree. And I would say that comics are sometimes the best way to summarize something. So can I just stand up there and do it instead, and we'll turn the thing?
It's just preferable. I tell you what, because there are two live streams simultaneously going around the world.
Okay.
So there's one here facing you, and there's one going from there as well.
Okay, right. So I'll just, should I just motion then
to
you,
and
Miriam?
Your beautiful colleague there.
Okay. Okay, and so then I guess for the sake of the people online, the little comic says, we seem to understand the value of oil, timber, minerals, and housing, but not the value of unspoiled beauty, wildlife, solitude, and spiritual renewal. And it's this idea of maybe blockchain is a way to start liberating some of these ideas of value. And so I was already given an introduction, so I am the head of research and development, but also a scholar and soon to be assistant professor at Warwick Business School. Okay, we can keep going. And so how I'm going to approach this talk with you guys today is that I'm going to talk a little bit about how forms of value exchange have changed over time and evolved, and how we can begin to see and recognize social value as something that is transferred and transferable, and then look at what this means if we have blockchain as a currency which embeds social value rules across organizational, societal, and individual levels. So over time, there has been what we know in the beginning was a barter system, so very much people traded on products. So it could be products traded for services, etc. But this had its limitations because, in fact, not everything is easily transferable like for like. And so here there's a guy holding a cow and he's saying, sorry, I've got nothing smaller. And it was this idea that at the time people ran out of ways to be able to exchange value. And so what happened was that people had to become a jack of all trades, and it was hard to be specialized in one thing, because if you wanted to trade, then you needed access to plenty of things in order to get what you wanted on the market. And so eventually we moved to a money system, which was firstly precious metals and then eventually paper money. And now we see the emergence of the online cryptocurrencies. And so none of this is perfect. As we know from the housing crisis in 2008, there is ways to manipulate the financial markets that don't necessarily benefit society. And so in this case, plenty of people lost their homes because they had been given a mortgage when they probably shouldn't have been, and this left the entire market very susceptible, and it blew up. And then the Panama Papers scandal that just released shows us how manipulatable actually is the financial industry. So plenty of elites were uncovered to have hidden money, and we're still not entirely sure of how much money was kept out of regular society and played around with at their will by several individuals. And finally, with the cryptocurrencies as they are, it's still not perfect either, so there's still a lot of association to things like Silk Road and illegal activities. And so where do we go from here? Well, one way to explain it is that these currencies right now are based on monetary value, so they remain something that is financial, but they don't equal social value. And if you think about something that John F. Kennedy said, he said, economic growth without social progress leaves the great majority of people in poverty, while few benefit. And so social progress or social value being things like basic human needs, well-being, and opportunity. And our fundamental measures in society like GDP don't equal social progress. So what can be done? Well, already there's some large efforts in recognizing what is social value and being able to measure for social value. So social value being the change in condition of people when they interact with organizations. And so the change in condition meaning their health, their physical state, their access to products and services, their emotional or mental well-being. And you see things like Bhutan and their National Happiness Index as a way to start bringing in some of these factors. You see Michael Porter, who is the father of strategy, developing something called the Social Progress Index. And he's already engaged in measuring this in several countries around the world. And then we have initiatives such as the one at the Center for Citizenship, Enterprise and Governance and Ceratio on the social earnings ratio. And this was initially developed at an organizational level to be able to measure the social earnings or the social value that was created alongside the price earnings or the financial value to equal total company value. However, over time, we've been extending this to the individual level as well as a country level. But the problem with these initiatives so far is that they remain at the periphery. And so while at CCEG we've measured for millions of worth of social value, we've still not been able to reach the masses with the tool. And the same for the other initiatives. They remain largely in small pockets of individuals that gain interest. And so what could be done differently? Well, this is about as technical as I will get, considering blockchain, but there is definitions of blockchain. This is Butlerin's definition. When he says that blockchain is a magic computer that anyone can upload programs to and have the programs to self-execute, where the current and all previous states of every program are always publicly visible, and each carries a very strong crypto-economically secured guarantee that programs used on the chain will continue to execute in exactly the way that the blockchain protocol specifies. And the most exciting part of what he says is they're Lego mindstorms for building economic and social institutions. And so it's this idea that we can bring in entire new rule sets to how we conduct business, how we understand value, how we conceive of value and change it. And the idea here, building on this idea of social value, and it's so far not fairly represented in our forms of value transfer, is that a blockchain currency underpinned by social value rules could revolutionize what is considered valuable and how we transfer that value in our societies. And so this idea being that value some rule, which I wouldn't be able to code, but hopefully there's lots of coders out there that could, that would be that financial value plus the social value, the change in condition of individuals along a product or service had to be met. So there'd have to be a threshold for social value that's met, or at least it means if it wasn't met, it would be diminished. Okay, and so what does this mean? If we start philosophizing for a second, there is a really great quote by the Dalai Lama. It's called The Paradox of Our Age. And what he essentially says is that there is a lot more education but less wisdom. There's more advanced medicines but less health. And he continues on in this trail of we have bigger communities but less friendships. And he's really stimulating this point, I believe, that we have built a lot of our economic and social orders without valuing the social and the humane inside of this. And if we were able to develop a blockchain currency with social value rules, what you would see is another set of governance. And I believe somebody else is going to talk about governance later today, which is very exciting. But also that the priorities that our social and economic institutions would have could change, because it wouldn't just be about the quantity of jobs, but it would be about the quality of those jobs and the products and services they created. So it's not just that we're going to build a highway and we're going to create 1,000 jobs, because I love when people use that in the budget statistics, because who necessarily wants those jobs? And so it's this idea of we're usually counting numbers but not considering what the implications are behind them socially. And this would bring it into effect. Is this what people actually want, and are we helping them? And it would be so the effectiveness and authenticity of our institutions we would define profit more broadly, and therefore what we consider to be profit and how we distributed it would be different, including the resources. On an organizational level, I'd like to use a quote from Khalil Gibran here. So he's a spiritual scholar from the early 1900s, and he talked about buying and selling, amongst other things. And in this he says, it is in exchanging the gifts of the earth that you shall find abundance and be satisfied. Yet, unless the exchange be in love and kindly justice, it will but lead some to greed and others to hunger. And I unfortunately think that this is kind of a reality, and mainly because a lot of our exchanges lack love and kindly justice. And not because we don't want them to have it. In fact, it's just because the financial system as it is doesn't necessarily prioritize that. So it's easy to just make money for the sake of money. But here, instead, if we had organizations that had to exchange their value based on some kind of social rule that was embedded and was transparent and accessible to others about whether it was created or not, then all of a sudden you would start to see that you could make decisions along your supply chain based on relationships and shared values for social or environmental aims. There would be transparency and accountability for their decisions. Some of this is already happening in the diamond industry and in the fishing industry that's been rampant with slavery. So they've started developing blockchain ledgers that trace the production of their products, and it's going well in being able to identify where there's wrongdoings along the chain. There'd be a heightened accountability to society, so it wouldn't be okay anymore to just say, well, we did it for the bottom line. Well, if your bottom line hurt a bunch of people along the way, then it's not okay, and in fact, your company would be devalued. And it would eventually contribute to meaningful workplaces and work as passion. So more so this idea that it's not just, I don't go into work to make money, I go into work because I'm doing something that contributes back to society or to others around me. And on an individual level, there's a quote by Marcus Aurelius that I like, and he says, "A person's worth is measured by the worth of what he values." And so if we start to think that people are valuing everything around them, everything from the water that you buy to where you decide to live, to where you work, to the clothes that you have, to the restaurant that you choose to eat at, and some of this matters about the social element as well as the financial element, then you see that we can start valuing people as more these emotive and value-driven beings rather than just intellectual or the rational agent ideas that grew up in early economic theory. And so it offers the opportunity, blockchain inbuilt with social value rules offers us a real opportunity to move away from those ideas, which I think a lot of people are already agreeing are too narrow. And so it enables ethical decision-making and a more holistic and caring view of humanity. And so really what I believe and what I hope this talk said is that blockchain opens up a Pandora's box of possible reconfigurations of what value is considered important and legitimate in relation to all sorts of transactions. A blockchain program built to transfer value based on social value rules will serve to turn our proverbial money trees into prosperity and abundance trees. And so I hope that by the end of today, with all the talks, we can talk about all the different ways in which we can move towards abundance and prosperity. Thanks.